Welcome in. It is the Northside Baseball Podcast. He is Jason Ross. I'm Mitch Whitmire, talking anything and everything Chicago Cubs baseball. We've got a good show. Well, I should say, we have a full show for you on tap. I don't know if it's necessarily good because we're leading with some not so great news that came down the pike just a few minutes ago. Not really surprising, Jason. It seemed like it was trending in this direction, but Cade Horton officially will be out for the season with the UCL injury. Tommy John on the horizon for him, a huge, huge blow for the Chicago Cubs. On top of that, also Matthew Boyd expected to miss a prolonged period of time too, so not a great start for the Chicago Cubs. In terms of injuries with the arms, you talk about being 4-6. I don't put much stock into that. We can talk about that a little bit down the road, but we do need to start with the Cade Horton side of things. This is a massive blow for the Cubs. And I know one thing we talked about, Jason, a few weeks ago is the depth of the rotation, and we can get into that in a few minutes, certainly. It is getting tested early with Matthew Boyd out for, again, we're talking weeks, and now Cade Horton being out for the year. And I promise this is not an overreaction in April, but losing Cade Horton for the entire season this early after what happened to Justin Steele in his first start last year is more than a gut punch. So I think anyone saying like, oh man, this stinks for the Cubs, like this is a gut, like it's more than that to me. Yes, the Cubs can still contend. Yes, the Cubs can still make the playoffs, but I don't think we can really sugarcoat this, Jason. Matthew Boyd was the opening day starter for the Cubs. He is not the Cubs' best starter. That is not like Tarek Skubal going for the Tigers, Paul Skeens going for the Pirates. Cade Horton was supposed to be the best starter for the Cubs this year. And so you lose your top arm right at the start for the second season in a row. To me, you can have all the starts you want for Javier Assad, Colin Ray, who I think can be good in this rotation if they're expected to be in it for a prolonged period of time. But you can't simply just replace what Cade Horton was supposed to bring to the table. I'm not doing a doom and gloom thing either, because this rotation does have depth. My overriding point is this is more than just, a minor loss for the Cubs. It is a massive loss. And so you probably go to Javier Assad, Colin Ray for now. We can get into that later. Justin Steele sometime in the summer, maybe Jackson Wiggins at some point, who knows. But losing Cade Horton for the season is the worst of the worst type of news you can get right out of the gate.
Yeah, it sucks. I'd like to go back to our preseason pod and redo my bold predictions because I said that Cade Horton was going to have the best season since Jake Arrieta, and he threw one start and one inning. So really nailed that one. Good for me. Actually, outside of just a personal thing, this sucks. Cade Horton's a really good pitcher. This is his second Tommy John surgery. I kind of talked on the website today with some folks. And we're getting into a kind of a weird place with Major League Baseball and pitching right now. And, on one of the things that's positive is, if you have arms that throw 98 miles an hour with disgusting IVB and great cut ride, they're freaks of nature. But on the other hand, they're freaks of nature. And Cade Horton is kind of a freak of nature with what he does with his arm. And you can either have soft tossing guys who aren't freaks of nature, who aren't pushing their body to the actual limit, or you can have people like Cade Horton who do. And when you have players like Cade Horton, they do this. This is what comes out of it. I know there are going to be some people running victory laps trying to say, I saw this one coming from a mile away. Man, you could say that about anybody who throws 96 mile an hour or above. Yeah, they're all going to blow out their arms. They're doing things that they're not supposed to do. If we talk like biometrically and like biomechanically, you think about your arm and where it rests. How often does it come here? It's only there by sheer force. It's why softball pitchers can go all day and baseball pitchers need 7 days off between their starts. We are asking these guys to do impossible body movements and adding like insane like outcomes on it. Yeah, this is a lot of stress. That's a ton of stress. These guys are going to blow their arms out with what they're doing. And of course they do, and it's, I don't want to take anything away from the human either. This is Cade Horton's second Tommy John surgeries. He's 24, 25 years old. He's a baby, and he's going under the knife for a second time. We're kind of commodifying these guys a little bit, which is kind of a bummer on it. From a Cubs perspective, it sucks.
Yep.
It's the one thing I will say is, not to be doom and gloom for a moment. Last year around this time, Justin Steele had the same thing happen to him, and we didn't have Edward Cabrera, we didn't have Justin Steele sitting around his backup plans, and so I know it kind of sucks right now, and we're in it, and we're feeling that kind of that doom wash over us on April 7th with what could have been the best Chicago Cubs right-handed pitcher in the rotation, maybe the best pitcher in the entire rotation. He's lost for the season. The extent we're going to have to wait and see. There's two kinds of Tommy John surgery. There's a full-blown Tommy John in which we will not see Cade Horton next year. Like, he won't pitch next year. We maybe at the very, very, very tail end of it, we might see him as like September as like a cool little boost. But usually Tommy John right now is about a year and a half to 2 years. Shane McClanahan hadn't pitched since 2023. He came back this year. He had a couple extra injuries, but you can see how long these things kind of take. On the flip side, if he has the brace like Justin Steele, I mean, we probably see him in May next year, which isn't forever away. It feels like forever away today. It's 13 months into the future. But that's the best case scenario right now, is that we get him back by May or so next year, which will hurt. We'll see what next year looks like with it. It's a bummer. The weird thing is that him being as good as last year as it was is going to hurt the Cubs kind of twice. They lost a year of control with him. Yep. And now they're going to lose a year of injury with him. So this is all kind of a little bit of a bummer. They're going to get kind of double whammied with it. That's baseball. That's life. So we'll see where we go. The Horton injury is a bummer. I've been a big Cade Horton fan since draft day. I've loved him ever since I watched him the first time. He's a very fun pitcher to watch, and we're not going to get to watch that this year, and for an indeterminate time next year. So we're gonna have to find out when he goes under the knife how bad it is. Fingers crossed. Right now, it's the brace, and it's not the full go.
Yeah, it's just I live in this frame of mind, Jason, where once a pitcher has Tommy John, for some reason I just convince myself, like, all right, they got that out of the way. I two Tommy Johns at the age he's at is pretty rare. You don't see people in their early to mid 20s going through Tommy John twice typically. And I know we had talked about it last year when he first came up, that he had already had Tommy John.
Yep.
So now having it again, and I think we've talked about it with Edward Cabrera, who's never had it, right? Like, and you're just crossing your fingers. I was reading someone's write-up on it, and they had said a lot, like, these pitchers today, with how much stress and strain is on their arms to constantly just max out with their velocity and to throw faster and faster and more consistently with it, Jason, that I thought someone phrased it correctly, and I'm not saying it as a joke whatsoever. They said a lot of these pitchers' arms are like ticking time bombs.
Oh, yeah, they are.
And that's
everyone.
And, you're seeing that with Cade Horton now, who you said 24, 25 years old, and he's having Tommy John for the second time, and depending on what type it is, you're talking about a guy who could return maybe in May, June next year. Like you said, if it's full go, you're not seeing Cade Horton next year either. Maybe in like September.
Yeah, maybe September if you're lucky.
And again, and that's looking way down the road. But even if it is that, it's not like next September to be like, oh, we got Cade Horton back, he can ramp it up and go out there and throw 90 pitches right away. Like, nope, that's not how that's going to work.
No, you'll be lucky if he's a bullpen arm at that point for that point in time.
Yeah, so it is. I mean, it is just eerily similar to Justin Steele's situation. I know they're two different types of pitchers. Steele being the lefty, Cade Horton the righty, and Cade Horton being a kind of a flamethrower at times. But the situation, it's like there's so much optimism last year, and then Justin Steele blows out his arm. I think it was in Texas, if I'm not mistaken, in his first start. And you're like, oh, okay, well, this really sucks. And where do the Cubs pivot to now? And again, we've talked about the depth with this rotation, and I believe they have true depth, but not depth in the sense where it's like, oh, they have another Cade Horton. Just, we hope Jackson Wiggins turns out to be a stud, but they don't have another guy, in my opinion, where it's like, oh, this guy can fill the shoes and then some with Cade Horton being out. It's like, you just hope that Javier Assad, Colin Ray, whoever else is tasked with piling up starts now the rest of the way can do a serviceable job, an admirable job for the Cubs. Because, I mean, I can't speak for you, Jason, but I had sky-high expectations for Cade Horton as early as this year based off what we saw last season. Yeah. So, again, you don't want to necessarily like rank like, oh, this hurts more than if it were this pitcher or this pitcher, but knowing that it is Cade Horton, it is kind of as bad as it gets for the Cubs. That's the one guy who was, you were, a lot of fans, myself included, were circling this year like, you can build the staff around this guy for the long haul, and now one start in. Was it one inning, you said? I don't even remember.
No, one start in one inning. He threw.
Remember watching it, and when he
walked
threw
off against the mound, Washington.
When he walked off the mound, yeah, correct. When he walked off the mound, it didn't even seem like it didn't, like sometimes these guys are like shaking their arm after it, or clutching it right away. He kind of just like looked towards the dugout. He didn't even point, and they came out, and then he just walks off the mound. And
I mean, I had some hope. I had some hope when he said it was from the forearm to the elbow as opposed to the elbow to the forearm, because usually it's the elbow to the forearm when these guys talk about it. He's had Tommy John before, so you were like, I don't know, maybe like he probably would know like what it feels like. I think, maybe we got out with the forearm strain, and then I don't know. This is the pessimist in me, because deep down I've got those voices, we all do. But the more positive things that were coming out, I was like, this is just the backbreaker right here. That's going to be bad because, it's coming out somewhat positive. We're getting up our hopes just a little bit. Maybe it's like 6 weeks. Maybe it's going to be on the shelf. We'll see him by June, maybe. And then, all of a sudden it was like, well, we didn't hear anything Sunday. Well, maybe it's Easter. They're busy.
Yeah.
They got family and everything like that. Okay. And then it was like, we're not really hearing too much. Then it was another doctor. And then it's Tommy John. It was just kind of the, we're set up there for a hot minute to think that, I don't know, maybe it was just a forearm strain, but no, that sucks. I mean, from a personal standpoint, he's my favorite pitcher to watch on the pitching, the staff, the rotation. He's awesome. I love watching him pitch. It was a lot of fun. I like the way that he attacks hitters. And well, we're going to be without him for a little while. And that really bums me out. And man, we haven't even talked about Matthew Boyd yet.
Yeah, it's a good pivot point, Jason. The Northside Baseball Podcast. He is Jason Ross. I'm Mitch Woodmeyer, talking anything and everything Chicago Cubs baseball. I promise, at least in some of my notes coming up here, Jason, there will be some more optimistic takes for the Cubs as a team. At least that I have. I have sort of stored up. When Cade Horton is undergoing Tommy John and it's announced officially 5 minutes before we click go live, we can't really start with anything else, right? So when the news is a little gloomy, it's going to sound a little gloomy coming out of the gates, but you mentioned Matthew Boyd also going to the injured list, a bicep strain. And I mean, it's just another injury that you put down. You're like, all right, now the depth of the rotation is really going to be tested. We know Javier Assad, for those watching live on the YouTube or shortly thereafter, Javier Assad is starting tonight on Tuesday for the Cubs against the Rays. Colin Ray will take a rotation spot as well. But I guess if you want to use like one of those, cheesy expressions, you can say when it rains, it pours, right? Because Matthew Boyd gets hurt and Cade Horton out for the year, and the Cubs are just going to be tested early on. I do think, Jason, there's one element to this where it's like they're 10 games in. It's a 162-game season. Yeah. They have a good enough roster. They have a good enough team. They're going to be fine. And I truly believe that. But I do think, Jason, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts, there's also an element of this where, okay, you're now faced with a lot of adversity right away. To me, it's important to not let it snowball out of control. Like if the Cubs, they're 4-6 right now. If they were to end up at like 5-15, I'd still say like, man, I still think they get right on track. But I think it's critically important at this stage to sort of stop the bleeding for now and sort of calm down the thunderstorm after the injuries to Boyd and Cade Horton.
Yeah. And, with a lot of this, it's 162 game grind. You're always going to find weird sample sizes within that. That kind of happens. Good teams lose to bad teams all the time. Bad teams lose to good teams all the time. So like the record right now doesn't really concern me. Like I know there's people who can't lose a series to the Nationals. Yeah, you can. You'll be fine. You'd like to bank some of those wins. So they've got a tough road coming up. They've got the Dodgers shortly, and the Dodgers are a damn good baseball team. So they've got kind of a rough month. And I think for a lot of it, April is going to be a take it on the chin month. The Cubs are going to kind of have to take it on the chin, and they're going to get punched this month. And we're going to see the kind of team that's left standing at the end of it. They brought in Alex Bregman as a leader. And that leadership is probably going to be important this month because it's going to be tough. They're going to be down, arguably two of their three best starting pitchers in the rotation. Jackson Wiggins is not ready to join the rotation right now. He's probably going to be a little bit, stuff is good, but he's still's got some things to learn. Justin Steele, isn't entirely ready yet. Maybe by May, he's back, and that's going to help. That's going to help out then, but he's not going to be back in April. I don't think he's going to be back in April. I think that's kind of pushing it. So they're going to have to take it on the chin a little bit. That's just what they're going to have to do. They're out Seiya Suzuki right now as well. So the offense is, we'll talk about their early returns on the offense soon. The offense is going to kind of take it on the chin. They've got to take it on the chin right now, and they've got to keep moving. And things will get easier. You come out with as hard of an April as they're having. That means the rest of the season is going to be a little bit easier. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be great, but it does mean it's going to be easier. So right now is going to be, I think it's going to be gut check time. We're going to learn a lot about this team. I know I'm kind of downer right now. I'm not trying to be a downer.
No. That's
quite the opposite, actually. I'm trying to find the positives. This is the kind of team that, this is the kind of moment that brings the team together, in a way. When bad things happen, good teams make it through. And, last year was kind of this year where everything started off great in April and May. And then, come June, things started to slow down, and it got to a little bit of a slog. And, we had the excitement with the playoff series against the Padres, but, kind of after May, it was always like, it always felt like tough mud that you were running through. You're always running uphill. The Brewers were doing historic things in Milwaukee. And it never had like a really great moment. So maybe this year is going to be a little bit of an opposite. We're going to kind of stumble out of the blocks for a little bit, and then we're going to make a furious mad dash to the end of the season when Justin Steele comes back, Matthew Boyd comes back, Seiya Suzuki's on the mend. We get these guys back, and then all of a sudden, we start to see the Cubs team that's closer to what we're going to expect. And we're not going to see the Cubs team that we did expect because Cade Horton's gone. Like we're just never going to see that version of the Cubs. But with pitchers nowadays, I think I think we have to start to kind of shift this where, when you start a season and you look at your 5 best pitchers, you kind of got to look at one of the ones you don't want it to be. And you have to realize pretty good chance you're not going to have that guy this year. The Braves
crazy,
are dealing with.
True.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, look at what the Braves rotation looks like. I mean, they lost like 3 guys to Tommy John surgery in like 4 days in spring training. This is just what modern pitching staffs are going to look like. And where this goes from here, I don't know. Our team's just going to buy as many guys as they can. I was listening to some guys. There's a Texas commit. He's 6'9". He's in high school. He's throwing 100 miles an hour from the left side. At some point we're either going to have to say that like this isn't sustainable at this age and this bodies, and pitching's going to have to change. When the guy's going 3 to 4 innings as opposed to 5 to 7, or it's going to be a situation where you just have 15 guys and you say, well, 5 of them are going to blow their arms up at some point, and we got the other 10. And so I don't really know what we're going from here, but it does kind of feel like we're at this stage where, like, the team that you want to see is never going to be the team that you do see. And we learned that last year, and we're learning that this year too. If there's a guy in your rotation that you really want to see, not all of them are going to make it. And it's kind of a bummer, but it's the reality. And this isn't specifically a Cubs thing. Look around the league. This is going to happen to every team in baseball. They are going to lose somebody that they do not want to lose, probably, and it's going to suck. And whether it happens on April 7th, like it did with the Cade Horton news today, or whether it happens on August 15th, it's going to happen one of these days. You're going to lose those guys.
Well put by you. And as we mentioned, it's important for the Cubs to pick themselves up off the mat now and don't let this thing spiral, because I truly do believe it's still a damn good baseball team. But I'm looking ahead. You've got your next 5. You have 2 against Tampa and 3 against Pittsburgh, but then you finish April at Philly, and then you have the Mets, Philly again, at the Dodgers, at the Padres. So certainly they will be tested the rest of this month. But we believe the Cubs are a playoff team, and they should be able to battle against those squads too. Northside Baseball Podcast, Mitch Widmeyer, Jason Ross with you. Early returns on the offense. It's looked sluggish, but I went and I did my own little deep dive, Jason, into certain aspects of the Cubs bats, and I wasn't necessarily searching for optimism. I was searching for truth with what I was looking for. And I do believe there are things both individually and on a team level that indicate it should turn around. Like, I'm looking at a Cubs team, Jason, that's third in hard hit percentage entering tonight at 45.9%. They're eighth in barrels per plate appearance percentage. And individually, I know a lot of people are like, I don't know what's going on with Alex Bregman so far. Alex Bregman is in the 100th percentile in chase rate, 96th percentile in squaring the ball up, 90th percentile in hard hit percentage, and 88th in whiff percentage. So if you think he's struggling, and if you just look at batting average, right, which some people still do, I do not nearly as much, but some people still do. I can't tell you, Jason, how many times I've seen people tweet out Alex Bregman's batting average so far this year. But if you look at some of the StatCast numbers, if you believe like, oh my gosh, he's really, really struggling. He's not chasing. He's still squaring the ball up. He's still hitting the heck out of it. And he's not whiffing. And so I look at some of those metrics and I say, okay, it's going to come around for someone like Alex Bregman, who has a very, very stable resume and sample size of a career that we can judge instead of a 10-game sample size so far as a member of the Chicago Cubs. So if you want to call it struggles for Alex Bregman, I'm not really giving him a crutch. I just truly believe you can just chalk it up to baseball being baseball. I think there's a couple other players that maybe you could look at, and it's like, they're struggling, and it might be valid, like someone like Ian Happ. But again, we've seen a large enough sample size with Ian Happ where I at least hope he can turn it around. But he is striking out a lot, and he's chasing a lot, and his expected batting average is not great. I know it hasn't been a lot of, fun watching this lineup day in and day out through 10 games, but I'm going to exercise patience. I don't know if you're going to do the same thing, Jason, but I'm going to exercise patience because some of these metrics I'm looking at indicate an offense that has been, it's going to turn around. You third in hard hit percentage, eighth in barrels per plate appearance. And then the individual numbers I noted with Bregman, who's, slotted into your 2 spot in your lineup. I think the offense is going to be fine. It's just one of those weird starts.
The Chicago Cubs in 2025 scored the 5th most runs in baseball. They scored the 5th most runs of baseball. Tonight, there will be 7 players in the lineup who are the same as they had in their very last game last year against the Brewers. Yeah, they scored 1 run in that game. It was a tough game. I don't want to anecdotally look at one game. I want to look at the long stretch. This is a roster last year that scored the 5th most runs. The only 2 differences are we're missing Seiya Suzuki and we changed Kyle Tucker for Alex Bregman. This is a good offensive baseball team. It's 10 games. Ryan O'Hearn is like leading the league in WRC plus right now. He's not an MVP candidate. He's so like we're in weird baseball time. When you look at anything from 10 games, you get weird stuff. Like right now, yeah, the Dodgers are the number 2 offensive team in WRC plus. We all knew that was going to happen. The Washington Nationals are 4th. The Milwaukee Brewers, who I think are a great team, are not the 3rd best offense in baseball, probably. They're 3rd right now in WRC+. If we're looking at simply runs scored, the Houston Astros are number 1. And I think the Astros have some good players in there, but that's not the number 1 offense in baseball. It simply is not the number 1 offense in baseball. It wasn't going to be the number 1 offense in baseball when you walk into this season. The Miami Marlins are 7th. If we look at the bottom of the league, you've got the Toronto Blue Jays. They're 26th. So like we're in weird sample size time right now. And if you're worried about where the offense is going to be in September because of the first 10 games, I mean, just weird things happen. And this happens every year. If we go back and we look at the first, through April 7th today. So I'll go through and I'll make it to April 13th, just so that we have a couple extra games. We started a little earlier this year. If we go through the first 18 games of last year, the Arizona Diamondbacks were the 3rd highest run scoring team. Whereas if you look at the bottom, you had teams like the Royals, who were 5th last. They ended up making the playoffs. The Guardians, the 59 runs, they were 23rd, made the playoffs. Phillies, 60 runs. These were good baseball teams last year. The Mets, 20th. So weird things happen in early sample sizes. I was talking to somebody on Northside today, and I can't. It was about Cam Smith, and everybody worried once again, the Cam Smith's the all-time greatest baseball player ever because he's having a good 10 games. If you look at last year in the first 10 games of the season, first month of the season. Sorry, Cedric Mullins, 7th best WRC plus, traded and then DFA'd at the end of the season, and then was it Ozuna was the other one, a player who could only find a 1-year deal with the Pirates this year. So like those are two of the top guys, and the top one in April last year was Carson Kelly. So like we saw it ourselves. We cannot take the first month and extrapolate that out. We certainly can't take the first 10 days. Am I worried? No. You pointed out good things on Alex Bregman. He's been good.
Thank you.
Ian Happ is striking out some. He's not going to strike out that much. It's weird stuff. Just like, if you want to look at the other round of it, if we talk about weird data right now, you've got Ian Happ right now striking out 40% of the time.
He started that doubleheader, by the way, 0 of 6 with 6 strikeouts.
0 of 6 with 6 strikeouts.
Yeah.
The previous 2,652 plate appearances, a 23.4 strikeout rate. He didn't suddenly become 2 times worse at striking out over the winter. The same thing here. We can look at it from a different perspective, okay? We can look at it from Nico Hoerner, and this is a positive one that's going to have some regression. Right now, his walk rate is 16.1%. That is insane. Last year, it was 6%. The year before, it was 6.9%. The year before that, 7.1%. The year before that, 5.4%. He's like we're in weird data territory. Like, I like Nico Hoerner a lot. I think he's a great baseball player. I think he's one of the more criminally underrated players in Major League Baseball. However, like he's not going to walk 60% of the time this year. Baseball's weird. When you take 162 games, like slog of a year, and you boil it down to 10 games, man, you find weird stuff. Weird stuff just happens. So I'm not worried about the offense. This is a good offense. They're going to finish. They're going to finish somewhere in that like 5 to 10 range in terms of runs scored. And right now it's on a complete offense. You've got Seiya Suzuki, who's still on his mend to come back. The Cubs are playing Michael Conforto right now. They're playing him a little bit too much right now. And when the Cubs get to a point where they're tired of somebody, and they know he's done, they do this thing where they give him every chance, like every chance on the planet
just
to prove, like,
yeah,
they really do.
Please show us something.
Yeah, they do this. They did this last year too, where with Vidal Brujan and John Birdie.
I was just going to say Brujan. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They gave him a couple of starts, and then they punted him. Right. Well, you got Seiya Suzuki on the road back, and it's like probably next week. It looks like, I think next Friday is what I heard. Maybe they're shooting for, something like that. I can't remember the exact date, but he's going to stay in Tennessee and then rejoin the team. They said that on the broadcast yesterday, and so it's weird that Conforto's starting again today. Ian Happ just had a day off on Saturday. It's not like he could be that exhausted. He DH'd one of the games on Sunday. It feels like the Chicago Cubs are kind of like saying, "Hey, Mike, come on, man. We're trying to give you a space. You can't complain that you got DFA'd after you started 4 of the first 10 games. We brought you into pinch hit a couple of times. You've played terrible defense out in right field. You really haven't done anything offensively. The numbers below it don't particularly look great. The bat speed's not particularly great. Thank you, Michael. You're on your way." But it kind of feels like they might be doing that right now, where it's kind of like, "Hey, Mike, this is it, but like this is kind of it." So,
yeah.
So we'll see. And that's going to change this offense with everything. The other way I'll look at it is after the first 10 games last year, we were all pretty convinced that the Chicago Cubs bullpen was horrible and it was trash and it was the worst thing on the planet. And then all they did after May 1st was lead the league in ERA and was like our saving grace in the playoffs. So maybe let the first 10 days go.
Fair. This one made me chuckle. We can apparently blame the Chicago Bulls front office, which was just cleared out and fired yesterday for Cade Horton being out for the year. If you are an all-around Chicago sports fan, which you and I both are not, we're both Cubs fans, but not all-around Chicago sports fans, I am telling you, as someone who grew up in the eastern part of the state of Iowa, where a lot of my friends were Bears, Cubs, Bulls fans, very, very happy Chicago Bulls fans today who have been begging and pleading for that front office to get cleared out for years, and it finally happened. But one more comment here from ZZ Top Song, who is blaming the Bulls front office, which is no longer the front office for Cade Horton being out for the year. So there's a bit of good news, I guess, if you're a Chicago Bulls fan.
If you're a Bulls fan, I guess you had to
I'm telling you, I have buddies I have buddies who are Bulls fans who, dating back 3-4 years, have been pleading for change in the front office, and they finally cleaned it out. Northside Baseball Podcast, Mitch Widmeyer, Jason Ross here with you. You brought up the name Michael Conforto, and Edward Cabrera in his start a couple days ago against Cleveland, Jason, gave up one hit, and the one hit was a massively misplayed ball by Michael Conforto in
Horrible.
the outfield, who I don't want to get it wrong, but I believe he took a step or two in, and then it just looked like he froze, and then the ball just went over his head. Like
And
if we're being nitpicky, Edward Cabrera gave up one hit to Cleveland. It should have been zero. It should have been zero.
It should have been zero. I played a lot of outfield in my life. A lot of outfield. We'll probably be on year 31 this year of playing some form of the outfield. And I'm not a major league outfielder, but I am. But I played a lot of baseball and everything over my years. And I know what I'm doing out there. And listen, there's one thing that all outfielders know: your first step is never in. It is never in. It's never in. It's never in. It's never in. It's always back. When you come in, you set yourself up for failure. And so you can say, listen, it was a tough day to see the baseball. Okay, maybe. The wind and it was cold. Okay, maybe. I'll give you all of these things. I have blamed so many things on short stands, on silver, on reflective like things.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter what. You always take your first step back. That's like, if it falls in front of you, it falls in front of you. That just is what it is. You kind of survive with that. You can limit to a single. You never come in on that. And Michael Conforto has played enough baseball to know that. But he's never been a particularly great defender.
But that's that play was like outfield 101.
That was outfield 101. That was just a really, really bad play. And over the last little bit, last year he was a terrible defender. I mean, just really, really, really bad. Looking at his defensive numbers, if we want to look at OAA, he was last year in right field a -3 in just 761 innings. That's not particularly great. If we talk all of his innings last year, because he was terrible in left field last year. That was his right field the year before. In left field, he was a -8 OAA and a -5 DRS. That's real bad. He's just not good out there. So if he's not going to be hitting,
you're not
terrible defensive. Yeah, and if I were Edward Cabrera, I'd be upset as hell, because that was if you want to talk about Cabrera right now, Cabrera's been awesome, and I don't think we realize how damn good he's been. I'm just looking at his Savannah.
That's what I was pivoting into now. Here. Just awesome.
98th percentile run value for overall, 91st from fastball, 100 for off speed. His XBA is a 151 right now. He's doing great on chase and whiff. The strikeouts aren't as good as they probably should be right now. He's going to walk some guys. That's just kind of going to be Edward Cabrera. Like, he's just going to be that guy. But I think there's some really good things going on. His arm angle's a little bit lower. I love watching him pitch right now.
Oh,
he's a little bit different than Cade Horton, because Cade Horton kind of goes right at you, and he'll would go 83 pitches and he'd be in the 7th inning. And Edward Cabrera might be at 80 pitches in the 5th inning. That's kind of
works around the zone a little bit.
Yeah, he's in the ballpark most of the time. It's not going to be like a strike throwing clinic, but his stuff is fun, man. And he's just rounding out as a really good pitcher. I know, again, the positives. I mean, very shortly, the Chicago Cubs are going to have Edward Cabrera and Justin Steele, knock on wood, at the top of their rotation. They're going to have Matthew Boyd coming back, and they're still going to have Shota Imanaga as their 4. And this season is not over. Season is not over. You have Edward Cabrera, who is putting up legitimate ace numbers through 2 starts right now, giving you some hope. I'm part of I know it hasn't been like the greatest offenses he's been facing and it's been kind of chilly nights. So, realize that the elements have been nice to him, but like, he looks legitimately good at the top of a rotation. You add in a couple guys, and the trade deadline is going to happen, and and we could talk about it a long time in the future, but they've got some guys that they could move. Edward Cabrera has given us hope, and he's given us that season that we kind of hoped that Cade Horton might give us. Edward Cabrera is kind of showing that right now.
6 innings, 1 hit, 1 walk, 5 strikeouts, no runs allowed in his first start against the Angels. 5 2/3, 1 hit, 5 walks, 4 strikeouts, no runs in his second start against Cleveland. You hit on some of my points, Jason, because the command might just be an issue that you try to rein in a little bit more, but it might always be a little bit present. I'm looking at a guy who threw 97 pitches against Cleveland, 51 strikes and 46 balls, which is not typically where you want your starter to be. And the number that really jumped out at me, Jason, This is per StatCast. Of his 97 pitches against Cleveland, 35 were in the strike zone,
Yeah,
which is just crazy to me. But he hasn't given up a single run in either start so far. And you see the stuff, you talk about pitchers, their stuff. I mean, it's on full display. You hope you can rein in the command a little bit more. But you hit the nail on the head. He and Cade Horton are two different pitchers where Cade Horton's just going to try to throw it past you. He's going to try to put a hole through the catcher's mitt and say, try to beat me. I'm going to pepper the zone. Whereas Edward Cabrera likes to kind of flirt around a little bit more. The other thing I saw with Edward Cabrera that at least piqued my interest, Jason, that changeup, which against Cleveland had an average velocity of 93 miles per hour. He threw it 46% of the time, fastball 21% of the time, and the sinker that we saw him use a ton with Miami, almost non-existent compared to years past, used it just 9% of the time against the Guardians. So the Cubs are clearly, it's you make the trade, you get your hands on the pitcher, not literally, but you get your hands on him and tinker with some things you want to. And I think one of the things we're seeing with the Cubs is fastball usage way up, sinker usage way down, and leaning on that changeup, which is, I mean, you're throwing a 93 mile an hour changeup. It's pretty damn electric for Edward Cabrera. So part of me is like telling myself, hey, temper the expectations a little bit. The other part of me is like, man, he's looked so good in so many different categories through 2 starts that I'm hoping he can just keep putting the pieces of the puzzle together. And I think he can, to be a legitimate maybe 2 option in this rotation for the Cubs. But you said, I mean, the stuff so far has been ace type stuff from Edward Cabrera. And you bring up such a good point, Jason. This Cade Horton news is gonna hit a bunch of people like a ton of bricks, like knowing that Cade Horton's out for the year. But if we can at some point do what you just mentioned, like envisioning a postseason rotation, a 1-2 punch of Justin Steele, if he is the Justin Steele, hopefully at that point, along with Cabrera, you could do a heck of a lot worse than that for a 1-2 punch. Talking about Steele and Cabrera.
Yeah, you'd be in a really good place. You'd be in a really good place. And then, when playoffs come around, I mean, last year we were at a point where you were at Matthew Boyd and you were kind of hoping Jameson Taillon would give you 4 innings. And that was like where we were at with the Brewers. So, if they go into next year with their top 3, into the playoffs being Cabrera, Steele, and, Boyd, you're in a pretty good place. If Shota's looking good and he can give you a start or 2 in the playoffs in a 5-game set or a 7-game set, you're in an even better place. Jackson Wiggins is still a wild card. We'll have to see where that comes. So, I'm not at a point where I'm packing up anything. So I think it's okay to be bummed out. Like I am, and you probably heard it in my voice. I'm bummed out about the Cade Horton news. I'm still bummed out about the Cade Horton news. I'm going to be bummed out about the Cade Horton news probably for a little bit. That one bums me out. I'm a big Cade Horton fan. I love Cade Horton. It's one of my favorites to watch. He's been one of my favorites to watch since I saw him take the mound at Myrtle Beach when we first drafted him. I'm a big Cade Horton fan. At the same time, the band's got to go on. And we'll talk here in a minute about the Cubs and the Rays tonight, but there's 152 baseball games left. None of them will be started by Cade Horton, but the Cubs are going to play. And this is what happens. I mean, good teams lose good pitchers, and they have to handle it and move on with their lives. So tonight's going to happen. Javier Assad's going to start, and what the Chicago Cubs do in between that is going to be important, and I'm looking forward to it. And it's kind of sad, but it'll be what it is tonight.
Yeah, getting some reinforcements in the form of Justin Steele, offensively, Seiya Suzuki at some point in the not so distant future. One thing, Jason, I don't know, I can't get out of my mind is what you were talking about earlier, and I keep thinking, in the next week or 2, Jason, if Michael Conforto all of a sudden finds himself in the lineup like 3 straight days, he should probably take that as a sign that, it's not great based off how the Cubs operate, but instead it's like, buddy, you better do something to show us why we should keep you around. Yeah. So if you see Conforto in the lineup a couple days in a row in the next week or 2, and it lines up to when Suzuki's supposed to return, might not be a great sign for Michael Conforto, but we'll see. Let's finish up Cubs versus Rays tonight. You hit on it. Javier Assad on the bump. Now you definitely have a feeling that this is not going to be a short stay in Chicago for Assad. I've always been a Javier Assad guy too, Jason. He finds a way to be excellent at limiting runs without having excellent stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
He doesn't
that's
have
exactly what he is.
he doesn't have Edward Cabrera's arm. He doesn't have, Cade Horton's upside. He doesn't have like the resume of a Matthew Boyd, but he's been just damn solid when he gets his chance. And what helps him most, in my opinion, he has so many different pitches to go to, and his best trait, Jason, might be his ability to just never be predictable at what's going to come next. Because again, the stuff is not gonna blow anyone away. It doesn't jump off the page, but he has so many different pitches he can go to and so many different counts that he trusts that I've always looked at Javier Assad where it's like you kind of just look at some of the bare numbers and it's like, man, he's good at limiting runs and his best skill might be his unpredictability. And so I'm excited to see him get another opportunity with the Cubs.
Yeah, me too. One of the guys I want to highlight here, we talked about early returns on offense, and I was just kind of looking at the preview for tonight too. I kind of want to talk a little Matt Shaw right now. He's been hitting a lot better than I think we've been giving him credit for. A couple home runs here. If we're looking at his numbers right now, he is sitting at an xWOBA right now of 341. That is really good. That's right now in our lineup right now. That's the second highest. That's the second best xWOBA of any Cub who's starting tonight, which includes Michael Busch, Alex Bregman, PCA, Ballesteros, Swanson. Like his datas are not bad. His exit velocity is sitting at 90 miles an hour, which for a high contact hitter, that's pretty good. Nico Horner sitting at 85.5, and he's the only player with an xWOBA better than Matt Shaw in the year. I think Matt Shaw probably needs to get a little bit of love right now. Offensively, he's doing it. Defensively, he's looked better. He's not going to look great out there, I think, in right field. He's not going to look natural this for a while, but he's doing all right. So, I wanted to give him a little bit of credit on the preview. I was kind of taken in a weird way there.
100%.
I'd pulled up the Savant page while you were talking about everything, and I was like, get ready for my preview, and I saw it, and I was like, damn, his numbers look better than I was giving him credit for. Matt Shaw is probably somebody who I think could look pretty good. I don't know if you've seen the lineup tonight, but the Cubs are rolling out something a little bit different tonight. Lineup wise, especially against a righty, something we really haven't seen. So Horner in the leadoff spot with Busch 2, Bregman 3, PCA 4, and Amaya 5.
I like Miguel.
He's had a nice start to the season. He's got a higher X. I'm no Hap. Hap is off tonight. Conforto's starting in left field. Like I said, it's one of those interesting moments where
they have Sean Wright.
Yep, Sean Wright. They're playing Shaw. Yeah. It's been Matt Shaw in right field. I think they just kind of want him to get used to right field now. Picking out field space. Can figure it out in left field. He's played left field before. He was terrible at it last year, like I said. But hopefully they don't hit it over there. But yeah, it's a little bit of a new look lineup. Big Mo in the 6th spot, Dansby 7, Conforto 8, Matt Shaw taken in the 9th spot. They really need to start getting it going a little bit. And looking at the pitcher that they're going against, Mason Engler isn't a guy that we need to be super concerned about right now. He's getting hit hard this year. He's not walking anybody, but he's not striking anybody out. This is somebody who does not throw particularly great. This is not somebody that the Cubs should be super worried about. He gives up a good deal of hard contact when he pitches. He doesn't have a great fastball. His fastball on the season has been murdered. Absolutely murdered. Looking at it, his xWOBA on fastball, we're talking incredibly small sample sizes, but sometimes you can have fun with them. The xWOBA on his fastball this year is 1.403. That is a 1,403. And if you're like, wow, that must be much worse than his actual results. No, his actual results, that's actually he's been unlucky. Because his actual WOBA against is 1.714. His fastball's been destroyed this year. So this, in theory, this should be kind of a get me right game for the Cubs offense if we're going to have one. You've got a non-hot. You got somebody who doesn't throw very hard. 92.5 mile an hour fastball average. This is not somebody who is off to a great start. He wasn't particularly great last year. I feel like I'm kind of bashing on Englert right now. I don't mean to. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but just looking at the data, this is a good night for the Cubs to score like 6 runs. If they don't score 6 runs, it's not like don't shoot the messenger and don't like don't quit the season. You don't need to rage quit, but this feels like a good night for the Chicago Cubs to score a bunch of runs, and maybe feel a little bit better on the news. Like, take out your frustrations on Mr. Angler tonight. The Cade Horton, pour one out for him in the form of hitting 4 home runs and getting double digits.
I like it. We'll finish with this too, because you hit on a bunch, thankfully, in the preview. What are your expectations, thoughts for Javier Assad?
I'm not as big of an Assad guy as others.
Yeah.
I'll give him credit, though. Every time you look at Assad's numbers, you go, there's no way he can keep this up. And then he just does. And he just does. So he's in the nicest way, he's kind of a cockroach, right? And I don't mean that like negatively towards Javier Assad. I'm actually saying that in a positive way. Cockroaches just always seem to find a way, right? That you can find them living anywhere in the planet, basically, in any sort of terrible situation. They just exist, right? They find a way to scrounge. They exist. And in that way, he's kind of got that tenacity, right? Every time you look at him, you're like, there's no way he's gonna. This is it. This is the time Javier Assad just can't miss bats, and he throws 92 miles an hour, and he just doesn't have great stuff. And then you look at him, and he's got 40 innings, and you're like, his ERA is 3.6. How's he doing that? It's not like and when we're a lot of times when we think like guys, there's we talk advanced metrics. One of the advanced metrics we have is FIP, which is fielding independent. Basically, like, we take fielders out, what does a pitcher do? That's strikeouts, walks, and home runs. It's really all that they really affect, because the defense affects hits and everything like that. And then there's guys who beat their FIP. They're FIP beaters. What that means is they're guys who always post ERAs lower than their fielding independent pitching. So usually if your ERA is lower than your FIP, it's like a red flag, like, this guy's not going to keep it up. Javier Assad always beats his FIP. And we have some people who beat FIPs in a style. There's a way you can beat your FIP. And the way that you beat FIP, the classic FIP beater, is super low walks, monster ground balls. Don't give up the home run. You look at Javier Assad, he gives up a good deal of ground balls. Like, he's not like a fly ball pitcher, but he's not like a 50% ground ball guy. You look at his walk numbers aren't particularly great. His baseball based on ball average is like around 10%. He doesn't have a FIP beater. Like, this is not a FIP beater. This is not the kind of guy that you look at and you're like, well, he throws a lot of sinkers. Like, Kyle Hendricks was a FIP beater. You'd always look at his ERA, and his FIP would always be like, this guy's not that good. But he'd go out there, he'd walk one guy every month, and he'd get 1 billion ground balls. He double plays. That's how you don't score runs. You have a guy on first base? No, you don't anymore. Now you got 2 outs. But Assad doesn't do that. I don't exactly know how he's surviving this way. He shouldn't be. He doesn't. He doesn't make sense. He doesn't make sense. And that's why when I say he's like a cockroach, I don't mean that negatively. I mean that in a positive way. He just finds a way. He just keeps going. He has this kind of tenacity to him that is awesome. So I guess maybe I am a bigger Javier Assad fan than I give myself credit for, because I'm kind of talking myself into it right now. He just survives. He finds a way to survive every single time. And at one point, you have to assume that the pixie dust is going to wear off, but the velocity was really good in his first start in Iowa. I think he was sitting around like 93 something. If he comes up and he's throwing 93, he can help this team stay afloat. And you need players like Javier Assad. At the end of the year, Javier Assad's not going to be anybody's MVP or Cy Young Award winner. But neither was Colin Ray last year, and I think Colin Ray was an incredibly important member of the Chicago Cubs. So if Javier Assad can do that same thing, if he can find a way to be important, he doesn't even have to be important as long as Colin Ray was last year. Chris Flexen was a guy that we probably don't talk about enough on what he did in Chicago last year. He gave the Cubs like 30 innings. And I'll be honest with you, I thought he would have made it 2 and they would have gotten rid of him. I thought he was an immediate DFA guy. And he outpitched some of his peripherals and he probably got lucky. But those 30 innings mattered and they're important. And if Javier Assad comes up and he gives the Cubs 5 or 6 good starts until Justin Steele comes back, man, that could be important. That could be really important at the end of the year. So I'm rooting for Assad to go out there and get it, because he can do it. He's good enough to do it.
Perhaps a get-right spot for the Cubs tonight. Cubs taking on the Rays if you're listening to this live or shortly thereafter. First pitch in less than an hour. We started with the not so great news about Cade Horton. We end with some optimism. It is the Northside Baseball Podcast. Please click the subscribe button. If you haven't already, we're appreciative for anyone and everyone who chooses us on a weekly basis now that the season is rocking and rolling. And hopefully next week at this time, we're talking about a Cubs team that is over 500 and starting to navigate their way down the right path of the regular season. He is Jason Ross. I am Mitch Woodmeyer. This has been the Northside Baseball Podcast.